There you go.
Hi, welcome to the Oxbridge Formula. Today I have with me someone at Clare College in Cambridge who's willing to discuss things about his college and how he experiences life there. So first, would you mind telling me a little bit more about yourself?
Hi, I'm Robbie. I've just finished third year of natural sciences, specifically biochemistry. So I'm going into my fourth year, biochemistry part 3.
What would you consider to be the defining characteristic of your college?
I would personally go for friendliness. I'd say it's the common theme amongst the porters, amongst the people. It's quite a relaxed vibe to the college. It's everyone gets on pretty well with each other, I'd say. There's a lot of inter-year mingling, and it's still it's a reasonable sized college, so 150 per year, but there's still quite a strong community, I'd say, throughout the college. So friendliness, if I had to pick one thing.
Yeah, um, friendliness. Do you have any like anecdotes about the porters being kind or something?
Porter's being kind. I mean, the one I'd first go to is my first night ever in Cambridge. So beginning of Freshers Week, and you sort of come back and you don't really know your way around yet. You don't even really know your accommodation. I'd been locked out of my room at this point because I'd forgotten to leave my door on the latch, and the porters were just so kind and understanding. I'd accidentally left the wrong door open, and they were all just very, oh, don't worry about it. They'll help you move in. They'll help you move your stuff around. They're quite understanding, and I'd say they create the atmosphere that they're on your side, because obviously you have some parts of the college which want to keep it as sort of controlled and orderly as possible, but the porters tend to take the students' side, will help the students out and make it easy to host parties, have friends, and they'll give you warnings if they think you're being too loud, but that's more so that you don't get in trouble, not that they particularly care. So it feels like they're on your side.
Yeah. Um, so you talked a little bit about the Freshers Week, like the first experience that you had with Claire, but what was your first impression of this college?
I think first time I saw Claire was on the open day, and sort of it was a really beautiful day as well. So it made the college look extra nice, and I had a really friendly tour guide just taking us around. Clare's quite a pretty college, and particularly the bridge over the river and the older buildings um, really appealed to me. And it seemed sort of spaced out. Everything seemed nice. They mentioned the college bar was a particular highlight. So the entire atmosphere sort of, on my first impression, sort of seemed like they were creating a nice student life. It wasn't sort of focused on this college is going to rigorously push you to your limits. We're creating a nice environment for you to learn and study and have fun. Ultimately, you are students. You're not just there to study.
Cool. I noticed you said that Clare College has a bridge. So where is Clare College, and where is it in comparison to most of the other maybe lecture halls or stuff?
So Clare's a pretty central college. First year accommodation is just across the river from the Old Court building. So if I start with Old Court's essentially right in the centre of town. The river sort of defines the centre, and then on one side you've got Trinity, John's, and then the others, and Trinity Hall. The other side you've got Kings and Queens. Sidgwick site Memorial Court, which is just across the river and the road from the Old Court building, is very close by. So if you're a humanities student, it's a 5-minute walk in the morning to lectures. Sciences is convenient, so it's like a 10-minute walk or a 5-minute cycle for me. It's, I'd say, central to everything. Cambridge is quite an enclosed environment. It's very central. It's almost akin to a campus university. Not that I've ever been to a campus university, but given how everything's sort of all together in this one small space, it has perhaps some of those elements, and Clare is sort of right in the centre. And even the second year and third year accommodation, which is sort of a little further round, is still actually very central. It's sort of a 5-10 minute walk into town, 5-minute cycle. So again, very it's all very close in and convenient, and you do feel like you're actually in the sort of heart of Cambridge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds like a really nice place to be. I was just thinking, I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about the accommodation at your college. You mentioned that the first years are closer and the second and third years live out. How does that work?
So first year they've got Memorial Court, which is this sort of large converted hospital from World War One, I think, and all the freshers are all in one sort of location there, which is quite nice. And you've got your own little staircase with people you get to know, perhaps best. And then second and third year, you move to the Colony, which is sort of along the road. It's sort of a 10-minute, 15-minute walk along the road, but sort of the road curves round, so you're still actually remaining quite central. And yeah, all the second and third years live there, and I actually preferred living in Colony. Third year especially, I got a sort of massive Georgian room with tall ceilings, which was really nice. And I could also, the second and third year, you can choose to live in groups with your friends. So I was living with 3 of my friends, which makes it very nice. And everyone's sort of on the same little site, and it's sort of its own little site off the road. So you feel a little you get a nice little distance and sort of privacy living in Colony and Memorial Court, to be fair, from the rest of Cambridge. I'd say the advantage of Memorial Court is it's closer to Old Court, where you've got the buttery, you've got the bar, which is called Cellars, and also at Memorial Court or Mem is the library and some of the facilities to go along with that. But Colony also has the gym and the plus side. So is one where I think I don't remember knowing about the second year and third year accommodation when I applied. But it's not one actually which was sort of a surprise once I did figure it out. When I was at Cambridge, it was no, actually this is perfectly fine. This is quite nice to live in.
Yeah.
And for me, location is always something which I value. So it still stays pretty central, which I really hold high.
Is the accommodation at Claire's banded or so are they like tiers for the accommodation, or do you just ballot for them?
So in first year, they are banded. So there's, I believe, there's box rooms, and then there's shared en suites, which is what I was in, and then there's sort of single en suites, and then sets. I think that's the range. But then second year you ballot and you have the room. Although you can sort of, I believe you can put price sort of requirements on it. I'd say Claire's relative. It's not one of the. It's sort of, I'd say, middle for pricing. It's not one of the more expensive ones. I wouldn't say it's the cheapest either. But there are sort of lower cost ones. I'd say second and third year, there's probably less choice in terms of pricing. You more choose the room you want and the price that goes along with it. But it is also less expensive, I think, Colony. They are technically less nice rooms than Memorial Court and some of them there.
I noticed you talked about the bar quite a lot, and it sounds like it's quite famous. What can you tell me a little bit more?
Yes, so the bar is built into the cellars underneath the chapel, so hence it's called Cellars. I'd say it's quite it's one of the key social spots within Clare. The bar sort of plays quite a large role within the community, just as a social space, I'd say, in the evenings. I'd say in particular that makes it unique is A, it's a very nice bar. B, it holds quite a lot of events. So in particular, Friday Ends, which is Clare's the only college which has weekly sort of events where it's sort of different music acts every week, different DJs from the local clubs or bands coming in. And I believe sort of it's in the past they've had quite impressive acts before they got big. So Bombay Bicycle Club, I think, performed there before they got famous, which is quite cool. But yeah, it's just a weekly event, which I'd say mostly freshers go to, but you get quite a lot of second years going to
Yeah.
as well.
What's been your most I guess like favorite memory that you've made in the bar?
Ooh, good question. I think the nicest moments in the bar is probably it's not the special events, it's the when you just go down with friends and have a nice chill evening, hang out with friends. I think those are the ones which sort of stand out as particularly, you feel particularly comfortable, particularly sort of happy. Um, it's a nice, friendly environment. It's outside of the events. It's not too busy, but it's still got a bit of an atmosphere. The bar staff I mean, they're members of the college as well. That's another thing. It's a student-run bar, so the bar staff are all of your friends and people you know. And even if you don't know, actually, you do get to know. Everyone's pretty friendly, so you sort of get to know people. If you go and just hang out with friends there, you get to know some of the older years, some of the younger years as you go through the college, obviously. So I'd say just the nights when you just go along with friends and maybe play some pool or something. Those are the nights which stand out the most.
Out of all the events colleges has hosted, what's been your favorite one?
So I'm particularly lucky. Clare is having one thing that is less good about Clare at the moment is it is having some quite large building works. But I was lucky enough in first year that the May Ball could still happen, and the Clare May Ball is it was an annual one. They're having to pause it for the next few years while the building works are taking place. But it would have to be the May Ball is is a standard Cambridge ball, and that is very extravagant, black tie, music acts, the lot, and there was sort of a bunch of events. So there was laser tag, those sort of fun stuff like that, helter skelter, sort of punting tours along the river, some 3D virtual goggle thing events in the main hall, and sort of poker, that kind of thing. I think that has to stand out as the event. But like I said, I believe they're not having another ball for the next 2 years. But they do also do now a summer garden party, which is normally in the gardens. Clare has particularly nice gardens, so that's another nice summer event. I'd say the ball though is the standout.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to focus a little bit on what you said at the ball. So do people play laser tag in their black tie dresses?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think I took off my jacket, but other than that, yeah, you're sort of running around in this sort of slightly maze tent thing they have set up in the gardens, and yeah, you just play laser tag with your friends. That was a particular highlight for me. Um, it's one which is perhaps seems quite different to the vibe you'd expect from the ball, with it being quite a fancy setup, but it was so much fun. That and the food and the drinks were probably my favorite parts from it. The
Yeah,
food and the drinks are excellent, to be fair.
yeah. And you touched a little bit on the fact that Clare has particularly famously very beautiful grounds. Um, well, yeah, can you first describe to me like what sort of grounds Clare has?
So the main gardens are the scholars' gardens and the fellows' gardens. They're sort of, so you have on one side of the river you have the old court buildings, and then just across the bridge you have the fellows' garden, which is quite a large garden, which is it's extremely well kept. They've got a bunch of weird plants in there, so like the only flowering banana plants in the UK that are open air. But I think my favorite moments from the gardens, just to pick out one, are sort of in the summer terms. Often when you get your lunch, you might go and sit out on the balcony on the river and sort of watch the punts go by, listen to the tours, give interesting histories about the different colleges, and you can just sort of sit in the garden, and it's a very nice, peaceful place as well. They've sort of got little walled off, not walled off, but separate areas, sort of with a sunken pond, sunken garden, and sort of little paths that go through some taller plants, and it's just a really nice space to be in.
What's been the most like what's been Clare tradition that you didn't know about before coming into college?
Because I've been there 3 years, they sort of appear particularly normal to me now. I think the Clare Ents actually that I mentioned earlier, that is something which no other college does to the same extent. That is one which certainly appealed to me, sort of sounded particularly fun before I came. And yeah, like I said, other colleges don't do. Yeah, I think that one stands out because otherwise it's little sort of things like the people getting extremely involved in the Easter term during exams. In the library common room, there's a Wii and there's Wii golf, and people get extremely involved and extremely competitive about it. Just as I think the exam fever sort of makes that kind of thing seem exceptionally fun and interesting in comparison.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so how is the library like at Clare? Do you use it a lot?
I personally don't work in the library that much. I'm quite keen on going to Sidgwick site because it's very close to Memorial Court, and there I sort of hop between different libraries. It's really nice though when I do work in there. It's quite large. There's quite a lot of space, so even in exam term, there's normally enough space for people. Um, I think its hours are 7 till 12, maybe 6 till 12, and then in exam term 7 till 2 in the morning. So it's not one of the 24-hour libraries, but it's still pretty good. Yeah, I'd say it's good. It sort of covers all of the books. It's a building, I think, from the 1920s, 30s, so it's nice. I'd say the library common room is sort of a reasonably important social centre within Clare. A lot of people meet there, and I'd say that's where a lot of the mixing between years goes on, or goes on and starts. I'd say you've got sort of first years and third years and second years and every different type interacting and meeting. And then also on Fridays, there's often donut Fridays. So the librarians buy donuts for people to come and have, which is always really nice. Or they might do tea and coffee in the afternoon. And the librarians put on little sort of almost mini welfare events for people to come along, which is, I think, that's the nicest thing about the library.
Yeah. Yeah. About that, what kind of welfare events are held at your college?
So there are quite a few. I'd say wouldn't know for certain off the top of my head if there are ones every week, but it sort of felt like it because there's as part of the JCR committee, there are two two sort of designated welfare officers who put on a lot of events. So that might be, I think every week there was sort of a drop-in session for welfare. If you have any problems, you can always email them. And then they'll run other events like welfare questions, where if you ask a welfare question, someone will deliver a cookie to your room, or that kind of thing. Or if you ask a welfare question, you might get a panini. And then they'll run different seminars and so on, especially in Freshers Week. I'd say that's when a lot of the different welfare seminars are held. But Claire's pretty good. Personally, for me, if I had any welfare problems, if I wasn't going to Friends, I would have gone to Helen, the nurse, because she's really nice and she's always been very helpful to me if I've had illness or injuries and stuff. So I'd say that's the things I go to. And then in exam term, just little extras, and they have like massages you can sign up for, sort of a head and neck massage. You can sort of have a 10-minute slot you sign up for once a week. They'll do that, maybe twice a week. So that's just little things they add in during the exam term. But yeah, I'd say the welfare's okay. It's sort of one which I guess every college would have things where they think we're good on this stuff, but we could do more. We could do different things differently.
Yeah, I guess if you were the welfare rep, what would you like introduce?
So my friend, one of my best friends, he was LGBTQ plus rep for my college, and he sort of was really good and really on it, did loads of events, and he found, I mean, the hardest thing I suppose is creating attendance and getting people to go. So obviously people just are very busy and they'll have their own thing, so they can't make every event. So I think the best way of improving the welfare would be to increase attendance. And I'm not sure there's any sort of easy hacks to that, to be fair. I think the sort of initiatives like I mentioned, the delivering a cookie or a panini, I think those sort of stand out as successful because it just encourages more of a dialogue. I'm not sure the welfare drop-in sessions necessarily had that many people going to them. I think also it's when I think about it, I go outside of Helen, the nurse, who would I go to for welfare advice? I guess my tutor, but I don't necessarily interact with him that much. The tutor was our pastoral, looked after our pastoral stuff, and our director of studies over academic affairs. And it sort of depended on year by year of who I had as to who I'd go to, I suppose, between the different members of staff who looked after me in that sense. So I think Claire could perhaps do a better job of labeling and sort of making it clearer who are the people to go to, and maybe encourage more meetings with a wider variety of staff, so you feel more comfortable going to them
Yeah,
as welfare reps.
yeah. And you talked a little bit about people being student representatives in the JCR. So I know the JCR is also like a student body, but also a physical place in college. So what's something you like about your college's JCR?
So starting with the physical place, so technically Clare Cellars, the JCR is attached to the bar, and in the night the bar expands into the JCR. But I'd say most people use the library common room, the LCR, as the sort of midday afternoon. That's where you might meet and hang out and just sort of sit around and relax a little bit in between work and lectures. So I'd say that the JCR building or room itself isn't really used so much as a JCR in Clare. I'd say the LCR takes that role. And then Colony, where second and third years live, also has a Colony common room, which gets a bit of use in a similar way to the LCR. The committee itself is quite good. Obviously, it's a student committee, so its actual powers are limited. But I think they're particularly strong on environmental issues, on what other stuff is it good at? Sort of sexuality, women's health, and the different issues to do with sex and gender. And I'd say it's relatively good at that because there's students and they're all very passionate about it. The academic affairs officer does a lot of the work. The accommodation officer does a lot of the work organizing the ballot on behalf of the college. It's sort of one where the committee does a lot of work, and they meet weekly and do a lot of different things, and they're the ones who run the BOPs, for example. I'd just say that, like with any college, I think their power for sort of important issues, I think especially in the context of the pandemic, sort of highlighted that often if the college wants to, they can just dictate, we are going to take this action, and JCR doesn't necessarily have that much power to say otherwise. But that being said, I think the committee is all very passionate and does try their best, and when they're given an opportunity to improve things around the college, I think they do actually achieve as much as they can.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I guess on that note, I know this is a conversation that's kind of ongoing in Oxford and Cambridge, but how would you what's your college's approach towards diversity, and how would you kind of maybe, if it's difficult to quantify, maybe how would you rank it on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of their approach?
I think so. The students are quite passionate about it. They're very passionate even. But I think I wouldn't say Clare is a college which necessarily stands out for being particularly diverse. I certainly don't think it's the worst out of the Cambridge colleges, but again, I'm not sure that's actually saying an awful lot. I think it's sort of to give. I'm not sure if I could give a numerical ranking to it because it's sort of there's so many aspects to it. I think Clare is improving and it is trying to improve its diversity. So there's quite a lot of outreach programs. So the JCR does have a BAME officer that I believe does a lot of work with the access officer as well to try and increase people applying to Clare from a wider background. I think Clare does want to encourage diversity, but at the same time, it's a very old college, and I think the way I describe how it operates is slow. It seems quite resistant to change, not necessarily because it opposes the direction of the change, but more in a sense of it just operates so slowly that it's hard for things to be done, especially from a student's perspective. You're only there for 3 years, and if things take a 5-10 year approach, then it's quite hard for students to deliver change they want to see within the organization, and I suppose it's hard for them. So yeah, like I said, it's hard to quantify, but I think they certainly could do more, and I think hopefully trying to do more.
Yeah, I guess out of the colleges that you know about in Cambridge, which college do you think Clare should like aspire to be in terms of their approach? Yeah.
I think King's certainly is a college with the reputation for being the most diverse and encouraging diversity. The way they operate, I believe, sort of, they really do encourage trying to get as wide a background of people to apply as possible. I think King's would be the standout college. I think if you just look at the sort of a simple thing like the amount of state school versus private school students, I believe King's is consistently the college which performs closest to the national average of what the actual split is. So I think King's would be the college to apply for, but at the same time, King's is a different college to Clare, so I could understand if Clare thinks there are some nuances to Clare itself which can't necessarily directly translate. But I think certainly King's encourages the widest background to apply.
Yeah. And I guess what's the funding like at Clare's?
So I'd say for a lot of it's sort of a theme of Clare perhaps is it sort of comes in the middle. I wouldn't say it's particularly cash strapped, perhaps in the context of the building works. That perhaps limits it slightly, but it's pretty good on bursaries and travel grants and funding from that perspective, and bursaries and scholarships. So I think it's not one of the colleges with loads of money that is able to fund. So, for example, we got a £300 travel grant for your time at Clare. You can have £300 to go towards travel somewhere, which is great. But at the same time, you've got colleges where it's £300 a year can go towards your travel. So I think it was John's that has that system. So it's not at the upper end where they're providing that much money to the students, but at the same time, £300 is £300. That's really nice to use for travel and for trips. Yeah.
I guess one question that I'm noticing that you've been comparing a lot of colleges to Clare, but what college do you think is the most different from Clare?
I'd say so. Clare I define as sort of a medium to large college that's very central and quite an old college. So I think you'd be looking at some of the further out colleges that are more modern. So your St Edmunds, which is, I believe, a grad college, I think, or a mature college, I forget which. Your St Edmunds, maybe Churchill. Churchill's quite a modern college, but at the same time, I've got lots of friends at Churchill, so I'd say the actual similarities between students and stuff is pretty similar. I think it's how the colleges themselves might be quite different, but the students tend to be very similar. But I'd say Church or St Edmunds, which are further up the hill, or maybe a Homerton again, which is quite far away from the centre. I'd say those are the ones which are perhaps most different to Clare. But yeah, I think that's probably.
Yeah. What sort of societies are you in college?
So I've been part of the Whiston Society, which is Clare's Science Society. I was social secretary for that last year. So that involves we put on a bunch of talks and have sort of a formal swaps with colleges. So you get to sort of see some of the other colleges' formals and how they do them. And then also do some larger formals for Clare, for people to come to. There's anyone interested in science can come along to, and you can talk to different people, meet different people. I've done a bit of squash with the college and other sports. Clare lacrosse, mixed lacrosse is really popular. Clare's somehow I think partly through enthusiasm, partly through having a few people who are very good at lacrosse every year, we do very well in the sort of league tables. So I'd say that's one which I've got involved in quite a lot. CCFC, so Clare College Football Club, I've got involved a little bit with them. I'd say the football's quite a relaxed atmosphere. It's quite a friendly, sort of inclusive one. There's the first and the thirds. So essentially, if you want a game, anyone can play, essentially. And there's also the women's team as well. And so I'd say football, there's quite a large amount of people who play that. And I've got involved a bit in the football side of it. Trying to think what other societies. Those are the ones I got involved in last year.
What do you think is like the most unique society that Clare has to offer?
Ooh, good question. I think I'd say the enthusiasm and the socials that go along with Clare lacrosse are unique compared to other colleges' lacrosse teams. I think the Clare is very big on music, so its choir is particularly impressive and does loads of training. And if you want to get involved in that side of college life, then the choir, I think, is a standout performer for Clare. I'd say the thing that thing about most societies at Clare is they're just all very open. So last year I went to a bunch of different talks from a bunch of societies. So the History Society, politics, whatever, and it's people just go along whenever they want. Essentially, it's a very free form thing. And then other events. So the Jewish Society, they host some large parties. Purim, for example, they host a really large Purim, which is really cool because you get to learn a bit about the culture, and it's a really fun night. The sort of theme of the night is to drink a lot and sort of have lots of fun with friends, and then they'll do some of the more traditional storytelling and traditions that go along with that, and some of the traditional food. So that, I think, might be a standout for a college specific thing.
Say I had like £5. Where would you recommend I go in college, and what should I buy?
£5 can get you, for one meal, that will get you a lot, to be fair. Buttery is cheap and it's reduced for Clare students. So £5 can buy you your main, all of your sides, a drink, maybe even a dessert, depending on what different options you've gone for. So that, I would say, covers the board. Think of it in terms of, so every Saturday, there's no breakfast on a Saturday, but there is a brunch, sorry. So the brunch, £5, is sort of hard to finish a £5 brunch. The amount of food is a lot. £5 can get you a lot of food. And there's also the occasional vending machine here and there if you feel like a snack at some point. But I'd say, Clare, the prices they're not going to be I don't think they're the cheapest across all of the colleges, but they're certainly nowhere near the most expensive. They're pretty reasonable.
Yeah. And what's been your favorite dish at Clare?
Ooh, good question. Probably my favorite thing. They do very good sweet potato fries. I have to give them credit for their sweet potato fries. I think that's the one that immediately pops into my mind. I do really enjoy the brunches, actually, to be fair, because there's sort of everything. You can have your pancakes and whatever, but there's also the bacon, the sausages, the veggie sausages, black pudding, eggs, scrambled eggs, beans, etc., etc. So I'd say that the brunch stands out for me. But if I was, the first thing that popped into my mind then was the sweet potato fries, and they do some quite nice burgers. So I quite like the mushroom burger personally. They do.
Yeah. So would you say Claire is quite friendly towards, vegan and vegetarian options?
Yes. So I think there's always at least one vegan option. They implemented meat-free Mondays as well. So that's normally a really good day for food. And yeah, I think the college is moving. They did a survey recently, and the student body at least voted in favour of moving towards one meat option, one vegetarian option, and one vegan option
Hmm.
as your standard thing if there's three things being served. But I'd say at lunch there's two meat options, a vegetarian and a vegan option, and then at dinner at least one vegan option, sometimes a vegan and a vegetarian, a separate vegetarian one, and a meat option, sometimes two meats and one vegan. So it is sort of, there's always something you can eat. Um, Understandably, sometimes it's not something everyone wants, but
If I was someone who, didn't want to eat a lot of college food and I wanted to cook for myself, what's the kitchen facilities like at Claire?
I'd say they're okay. So I think roughly it's sort of, you're going to have at least two hobs between four people at worst. So last year I had four hobs between four people. So it was relatively small kitchens, but enough storage space. The fridge space can sometimes be a bit limited, and there's no freezers and no ovens. I'd say are the two items missing from the kitchen. Um, there are technically freezers on the premises, so those are for some people, and you can get special permission for some stuff. So my friend has diabetes, so he's allowed to have his own fridge and freezer in his room to keep stuff that he needs. And it's just things on. I'd say those are the only things, but it's quite good. My brother's at Oxford, so I know he has very limited cooking stuff at his college, and it's a lot more buttery focused. But I'd say if you wanted to, you never had to go to buttery at Clare. I mean, I barely did last year, to be fair.
Yeah, okay, that sounds great. And just a little bit into the formal halls, which is kind of an Oxbridge tradition, I guess. But how are your formal halls at Clare? And do you have like a favorite memory of a formal that you've been to?
I'd say I'd really enjoy. So there's your weekly formals sort of on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You can book on. I think Wednesday's technically a smarter one. You have to dress up slightly more formally, but there's sort of, and that means maybe you need a sort of a suit jacket or something, as well as smart casual instead of smart casual. But the college is reasonably priced. Normally, bring your own drink, so it's normally like ten or £11, I think, maybe £12 for the three-course meal. Sort of vegetarian options, pescatarian options, vegan options, or whatever. The food's normally pretty good. I'd say my favorite ones, they also do a couple of events. So my favorite one was probably our marriage formal. So our college marriage formal, we had sort of a fake ceremony and then had a big formal with everyone. I think that one was really nice because everyone was really dressed up. It was really nice sitting with my college husband and wife. Went for an unusual marriage, and that was a really nice event because it was sort of early in the Easter term, so sort of maybe early May. So the sun was sort of really nicely coming into the hall. It was a really nice atmosphere. Everyone was just very happy. So I'd say
Yeah,
that stand up.
that sounds really awesome because in my college, we do have college marriages, but I don't think we celebrate it as grandly as yours. We just decide together, I guess, and fill out a form. Um, it seems like you really enjoy life at Claire's, but when you first were deciding which college to choose, why did you initially choose Clare?
The location's something which always appealed for me. So I really wanted to apply for a central one. Clare had been the one which, when I walked around, I enjoyed the tour the most. It's probably my favourite one out of all of the colleges. So it was really nice that I got a place there. I really liked the bridge Clare had. I think it's sort of the bridge perhaps symbolised to me subconsciously that as a central college, it was a really pretty college. It's I wouldn't say it's a classic Cambridge college in terms of it's the exact layout all of them have, but I think it's got a lot of the elements of sort of the old courts and the different courts and the nice gardens and some of the older buildings and the nice chapel, which I personally find it just, I mean, from an aesthetic perspective, they're just very nice to have. But like I said, I think it was the central location which perhaps made me go for it the most. I think also I would like to think I was quite pragmatic in applying in terms of I knew there's an element of luck involved, there's an element of having a good interview. So I was sort of ultimately, and the advice I'd been given by people who'd been was, you're going to love whatever college you end up at, and you're not going to wish necessarily for any other college if you get pulled or whatever. So just apply for one that appeals to you. And at the time, I thought it was a very important decision. But in hindsight, it's sort of one where it's like, I made a decision I'm really pleased with. I wouldn't change it to any other college. But ultimately, I think you enjoy your time no matter where you end up.
If you couldn't apply to Clare's, or if Clare's didn't exist, which college would you have applied to instead, and why?
I would say probably Queen's. So it's quite close to Clare. It's again on the river. It's actually got quite a famous bridge because Isaac Newton designed it or something, or took it apart. The mathematical bridge. I forget the sort of mythical history behind it. But I'd say again, I liked its location, and it had quite a nice friendly feel to it. It didn't feel particularly ostentatious. It didn't feel too grand. It felt like it was a nice community here, and it still got some of the really nice features of some of those central Cambridge colleges. So Queen's was the one that particularly stood out for me.
Yeah. That's really, really good advice. Yeah, I have a lot of friends. I have a couple of friends at Queen, and they also seem to really enjoy central locations. I think that must be a running theme for people who choose central colleges. Is there anything you'd like to say as a kind of parting story or appeal for Clare?
Appeal for Clare. I'll try and give a good appeal for Clare. I think it's a really fun college. It's friendly, and that means it's fun. And I think it appeals to people no matter what you want to do. If you want to go out more, there's a strong crowd for that. If you want to have quieter nights in, there's a strong crowd for that. And it's got a lot of really nice facilities. It's a very central college. And I mean, I'd say the main thing is the friendliness. It's the friendliness and the fun. I'd say sum up Clare. It's just a really nice place to live and a really nice place to be.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Okay.